All right. Thank you, everyone here, both online and in person. I'm really excited to have our speaker here today. A little bit of housekeeping at the beginning, just letting everyone know of a couple of things that are coming up. We are off next week in terms of talks. It's Easter week, so decided to take a break. The week after that, April 11th, we're going to do our plant sale preview. So that'll be kind of a behind the scenes. What are things? Oh, I see someone that's interested. You know, try to highlight some of the plants that it's like either they're short in supply or, hey, don't miss out on this. As always with our plant sale, if you're a friend of Rinaldo Gardens, you can order early. You'll get a link so you can place your order, reserve things so you don't miss out. And then the plant sale is actually April 22nd. And it's not only a great way to get some really cool plants, but it's a great way to support the gardens. We also have on April 18th, Michelle is going to do a container workshop. This is a great opportunity. Bring your own container. We'll have soil, we'll have plants. Michelle, who's just a blast to work with, she'll help you put together some great combinations. We've got spaces still left for that one. And then our last talk of the season is on April 25th, we've got someone doing a class on introduction to worm farming. So that should be, a little something different. But looking forward to that. As always, we enjoy having this educational component. It's one of the things that I love about doing this is being able to share information. I had a class here from Wilkes Community College this morning, and I was telling them about horticulture, about how it's just this amazing group, a community that it's always sharing. It's never like, this is my secret, I'm not going to share this with you. It's like, hey, I found out how to do this. Let me show you how. And it's an amazing industry to be in. With that being said, I know that, I got my love of gardening from my dad, but when I was at NC State working on my degree, I was blessed to have some great professors, great experiences working at the Ralston. But Dr. Dennis Werner, or Denny Werner, was one of my professors. I took plant propagation with him. I took perennials with him. I think I took your graduate course on plant breeding. So he was one of the professors that always held me to task. I think I probably would have done better in his class if I turned in a calendar report or two. But what's been amazing, Denny's he's a fantastic individual, but the breeding he's done, he started out as a peach breeder. I do miss that from being at NC State. Was during the summer season, they would bring in all the peaches from the Sandhill station. And, some of the peaches he bred are, there's one China Pearl that's a white flesh freestone that just melts in your mouth. I wish I could find it. But, having that, and then he went on to, of course, breed redbuds, but butterfly bush, I think sweet gum. You did a little dabbling with lantana. So it's just, I always find it fascinating to hear from the people that have done a deep dive and really understand a plant group and how the breeding works and the genetics and everything like that. And then not just doing the research, but then producing some amazing plants. And Denny has done that. He'll go through this in his talk, but I'm just delighted to have Denny here to kind of see what one of his students has ended up doing. And just, you know, it's a great opportunity to hear from just a fantastic person.
Thank you, John.
You can just pin that to your column.
Sounds good. Well, I am honored to be here. Thank you so much for coming, and John, thanks for that kind introduction. I haven't been here to the garden since John came on board, and just a brief glimpse I got here this morning. It looks really nice. I'm just happy that John's at the helm here and has a great team of people here who care about the garden and want to move the garden forward. Yeah, I was at NC State almost 40 years, and as John mentioned, I taught and did research on a number of different genera. I'm now formally retired from NC State, but still doing a little bit of breeding on my own. You just really can't stop when you start doing plants, because you develop a new variety and it opens up 5 or 6 new possibilities and combinations that you'd like to make. So with that said, I'll just get started. I started redbud breeding in the late 1990s, in some ways inspired by the collection of Cercis at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. J.C. had a great collection of diverse Cercis cultivars and species, and somebody gave me the incentive to work with this group. And this is a scene that you are familiar with this time of the year, seeing redbuds along our roadways. It's just nice to see that tapestry of those different shades of purple. And this is a habitat that redbuds like, disturbed habitats on the edge of a woodlot and open space. Many consider redbud to be an understory species, but technically it's not an understory species. It really prefers to have more sun than, for example, a dogwood. And I've done all my breeding work with redbud at the Sandhills Research Station in Montgomery County. Full sun, high humidity, harsh environment, and they're perfectly happy there as long as you adjust the soil pH to get it more alkaline. So it does very good in full sun. The beautiful early spring flowering tree. Again, here it is in a somewhat shaded location. It's a very important species for our early pollinators, bumblebees, carpenter bees, other early pollinators. I guess what got me interested in redbud in the late 90s is thinking about the cultivars that were in the trade at that time. Almost every cultivar that was available was either found in the wild and, quote, domesticated, or was just found as a chance seedling in nursery rows. If you think about forest pansy, the ubiquitous purple redbud that is still very, very popular in the trade, that was found in a nursery row in 1947. And a lot of other redbud varieties were found that way. There was very little controlled breeding to develop new cultivars in redbud. And then I thought about all the wonderful variation. You think about flower color variation from the typical purple on the left, the near red of Appalachia red, white flowered redbuds, pink. So you had lots of flower color variation to work with. And then the variation in leaf color, which actually in 1998, the gold did not yet exist. That didn't come on the scene until John Rothling found that growing in a backyard in Greensboro, and John was responsible for more or less getting that popularized and commercialized and into the trade as Hearts of Gold. Still a beautiful, beautiful variety, and it's in the pedigree of lots of redbuds that I have bred over the years. Of course, the typical green leaf, the purple leaf of forest pansy, Hearts of Gold, and then in 1998, there was only one variegated redbud cultivar called Silver Cloud. Since that time, there's been 2 new variegated forms that have been released, and they actually have different genetics. The inheritance of that variegation is different in these different forms. Okay. Architectural variants, up in the upper left-hand corner is Ace of Hearts, our compact redbud that was discovered right here in North Carolina. And the weeping forms of what you're familiar with as lavender twist is the most popular weeping form, or was for many years. The weeping form that you see there in that lower right-hand image is one called Traveler, which is a Texensis form of redbud, a weeping form that was found in Central Texas and popularized and released as Traveler. Traveler has a slightly more open, spreading weeping architecture as compared to the abrupt weeping character of a lavender twist, for example. And now there are other compact forms that I've developed. On the left is a selection that I'll be talking about shortly. Single flowered forms, double flowered forms. There was an old cultivar called Flame that was found in the Midwest in the early 1900s. Been in the trade for now over almost 100 years. Okay. So let's just quickly talk about some of the prior cultivars that I developed. This is Ruby Falls, the weeping purple form. This was a hybrid of lavender twist crossed with forest pansy. The goal was to integrate the purple leaf color into the weeping architecture. And just to give you a very, very quick explanation of how we do some of this work. Typically, I grow the parental trees in large pots, 10, 15-gallon pots. And in the spring, right before flowering, we move those pots into the greenhouse. So these are trees that we wish to use as parents in the breeding program to make our different combinations. We try to do things in the greenhouse so we don't have to worry about frosts and freezes taking out the flowers on trees that we're using for crosses. We make all of our pollinations by hand. Redbud is self-incompatible, meaning that you need two different varieties or two different clones to cross to get fruit. If you put a redbud out in an isolated setting without any other redbuds around it, it wouldn't make pods. Every seed on a redbud is typically outcrossed, just like putting a red delicious apple and a golden delicious apple next to each other. Both, you need two trees to make fruit, same with the redbud. So we make those crosses, and those first generation seeds from a cross, for example, crossing forest pansy by lavender twist, we grow those F1 trees out. So these actually are the F1 trees that we developed between lavender twist and forest pansy, and these look just like typical garden variety green leaf redbuds. Weeping is recessive, purple leaf was recessive, so the F1s look like this. We grew these out in isolation at the Sand Hills Research Station. And as they get older, they begin to flower. Typically in year 3 or year 4, they'll flower. And we let those trees just naturally intercross to get second generation seed. That's called the F2. This is just basic 1860s Mendelian genetics. Okay, it's nothing high tech about it. It just takes time. Okay. So we had this group of F1s from this cross in the middle of a peach orchard, just to keep things relatively isolated. We collect those seeds from those F1 trees. That's now the F2 generation. And we grow out, we germinate those seeds in the greenhouse, grow out literally thousands of seedling trees, and then plant them out in the field by the thousands. So you're looking for that one desirable seedling. In this case, we were looking for that purple weeping form. So just this image just shows on the right a green leaf non-weeper as a seedling. On the left, even only just after about 3 or 4 months of growth, you can see that weeping have it already expressed. A weeper will grow along the ground if you let it grow to its natural desire. In fact, I've seen people use redbuds very effectively as ground covers, or growing them at the top of a wall and letting them cascade down a stone embankment. They're quite beautiful that way. I don't see them used too much that way, but that's something to think about as a unique way to use some of those weeping Cercis. And here they are getting a little bit older in a selection block. And again, just seeing the variation here. Let's see, where's my light? Do I got a light here? There we go. A little hard to see, but of course, weeping purple, green leaf normal. So we go through and select out all those weeping purple forms and try to do some testing and trialing to pick the best one. I am fortunate that I've had some great cooperators over the years. When we find something of interest in our breeding trials, the first thing we do with those selections that we choose is I'll send budwood to my cooperators in Tennessee. These are field nurserymen who do grafting. And these are the Neubauers at Hidden Hollow Nursery, been partners with me for all the 20-some years of breeding. They will graft about 5 trees of each selection. Then they evaluate them. I go out there and evaluate them in their nursery rows. And I have a cooperator in Israel also. Hochberg Nursery in Israel is also a cooperator. They're a big nursery that produces redbuds for the European Union. And he's been a great cooperator. And here is Omer Hochberg and his technician in field of redbuds. This is actually, these are mile-long rows of Ruby Falls redbuds. That makes one heart jump for joy as a breeder of Ruby Falls, okay? All right. He's just a great, great guy. I'm actually going to go over and see him this summer. So that was Ruby Falls, probably one of my first releases. We released Merlot, which is a Texensis form that has purple leaves. If you hear reference to the Texensis form of redbud, though the Texensis form of redbud is found in southern Oklahoma, down into Texas, into northern Mexico. And you can imagine growing in that part of the country that the Texensis form typically has better heat and drought tolerance. They have smaller, very glossy, waxy leaves that are engineered for reducing moisture loss. And I've used Texensis in quite a few of my crosses for that drought tolerance and that heat tolerance. They love heat. They do very, very well in that under those conditions. So Merlot has that Texensis blood in it, and it has the purple leaf character. So it's an alternative to forest pansy that has better heat and drought tolerance. On the bottom is just a row of Merlot I planted at the Sandhills Research Station after we released it. And here is a weeping form. I tried to integrate the weeping form with variegated leaf. This cross was made in the late 90s, so I used Silver Cloud as the variegated form, and the weeping form was Lavender Twist. And we came up with a variety here called Whitewater, which this is in my front yard, but you can see the variegated foliage. Here it is in full bloom. This one really hasn't been too popular. And when I developed this one, I thought, oh man, this is going to sell by the tens of thousands, 400, 500 maybe a year. Okay, you never know. It's hard to predict what the consumer is going to respond to. And I've learned in this business that not every variety I release is going to be a home run or a grand slam. Singles and doubles are fine, because some people will find joy and satisfaction in growing that. So that's okay. Here's Ruby Falls in my home landscape some years ago. And I talked about the double-flowered form that was found in the variety called Flame. Flame was found in the wild in Illinois in the early 1900s. And we crossed Flame with a variety called Oklahoma. Oklahoma is a Texensis form. It's that variety you see widely planted in landscapes. Has that beautiful magenta flower color. It's just hard to miss when you see Oklahoma along the roadways. So this is pink pom-poms. We got that beautiful flower color from Oklahoma, and the double flower from Flame. And this was a joint release with Alex Neubauer at Hidden Hollow Nursery. This thing is stunning when it's in full bloom. The tree is just covered with these beautiful double pink flowers. The double flowered forms tend to flower a little bit later in the spring. They're typically about 7 to 10 days later than your typical single flowered forms. There's the original tree of pink pom-poms at the Sandhills Research Station. Oh, that's probably it's probably in the 9th or 10th year after that seedling was planted there. Okay. Nice, you can see the little bit of the glossy foliage character that we get from the Oklahoma Texensis parent. Now, moving along a little bit further into the past 2010, when we're starting to work with the gold leaf form. Now, people ask me, why didn't I work with the gold leaf earlier in my career? It didn't exist, okay? John was the one who brought that into the forefront, and I think, John, you shared some pollen with me or some flowers very early, such that I was able to use hearts of gold in my crosses before really anyone else knew about it. And one of the first varieties that I released that has hearts of gold as a parent is Golden Falls. Obviously, John found the gold leaf form. There were weeping forms available. Let's combine the gold leaf with that weeping variation. Here's Golden Falls. These are some selections actually under trial at the Neubauer Nursery in Tennessee. This is Golden Falls, the actual clone here. This is a very vigorous tree. Typically, they graft red buds by using a process called chip budding. They field graft them. They grow up a seedling rootstock to about a foot, foot and a half. They put in an individual bud called a chip into that rootstock, typically the first couple of weeks in August. That bud stays dormant during that first winter. And then the next spring, they cut off above the bud, and that individual bud grows off the following spring and throughout the entire summer. They go from a single individual bud, they typically grow them up a 6-foot fiberglass pole, and they easily reach the top of that pole by about late July, early August. The Golden Falls went up to the top of that 6-foot pole and then came down with another 6 foot. Okay, so it put 12 feet of growth on in 1 year. And a lot of the varieties they grow are that vigorous. Those beautiful, rich southern Tennessee soils grow great, great trees. So that's Golden Falls in the nursery. There it is on the right, under production in the nursery. Here's a young tree in my home landscape. And then a little bit later, a couple of years later, here's that same tree in my home landscape. We grew out, we had a lot of weeping gold leaf collections. We probably had 40 to 50 of them we were evaluating as we grew out all those thousands of seedlings. So what we were looking for is that seedling that had the best combination of weeping architecture and resistance to sun scald and sun scorch. Unfortunately, a lot of gold leaf plants will show burn, particularly if you put them out in full sun. So we evaluated rigorously for that resistance to scorching. And I think we were successful in this particular combination. Here's in my home landscape, you can see I set this tree at this location because it makes this a really nice focal point as you walk up through that walkway there between my rock work. Just you can sit there in the patio and that tree just sort of stands out. And someone sent me a picture of their Golden Falls that they've espaliered next to their place of business. And again, remember, you might want to think about trying to grow a weeping redbud off of the top of a wall where you're going to let it sort of cascade down and show that nice weeping character. Okay, so now we had purple leaf forms, we had gold leaf forms, we have weeping forms. And as a plant breeder, you're always thinking of combinations that might be of interest to the landscapers or the gardening public. And the question was, what happens if you combine the purple leaf gene and the gold leaf gene? There's precedent for that. If you read the orchid literature, where they cross purple flowered types with yellow or gold leaf types, or excuse me, purple flowered types with plants that have more of a gold tone to the flower, they end up with lots of bronze forms when you combine the purple and the gold. And I thought, well, maybe we'll just end up with a bronze colored redbud if we make that cross of a purple with a gold. So we did that, and we started, these are actually F2 seedlings. So from that original cross, we're now looking at about 6 or 7 years later. This is a slow process. But here we have the gold leaf forms are easy to pick out right after they germinate because they have these lighter colored / gold cotyledons. And the purple leaf forms are pretty easy to pick out because the first true leaves that come out are purple. Okay, so now here's a little plant that's got, obviously it's got the gold leaf gene, but the first leaves that came out were purple. So we grew off a number of seedlings, and we began to see this interesting variation. You know, gold cotyledons, first couple of leaves were gold in this case, and then boom, get a purple. Okay, so we thought this could be pretty interesting. As this tree matures, what's going to be the dynamics of the color expression in this plant? And the dynamics of that color expression turned out to be a variety that we called flamethrower, where you have this diversity of leaf color on the same tree at the same time and at different developmental stages. This is the original tree down at the Sandhills Research Station. And this is an early spring picture here. And if we go through the seasons here we are in June, where you get that combination of gold and purple, and that new growth that emerges, it's just emerging right now. It's red, looks beautiful, okay? Very, very nice. And here we are moving into July. Often you'll see 4 or 5 different tones of leaf color on the same branch during development. Here it is a little bit later in the season, as that new growth starts to slow down a little bit. And I actually took this picture last summer at the Sandhills. This is one of the first grafted trees that I got, just showing the diversity of pigmentation in that tree in the middle of July. This is in the Sandhills in the middle of summer, and that thing stands up really, really well to those conditions. Okay. Here's flamethrower in a nursery setting. This is late summer in the Israeli production site. Any of you grow Ace of Hearts? Ever try growing Ace of Hearts redbud? Ace of Hearts was discovered by a gentleman named Paul Woody, who was getting trees from I believe it was from a Forest Service nursery, if I'm not mistaken, growing them out on his property. And he noticed this one interesting variant that was much more compact, had small leaves, and the leaves had this beautiful, distinct heart-shaped character. Okay. So he named it Ace of Hearts, and it's in the trade. And what is so special about Ace of Hearts? This is just, gosh, nature is remarkable when you think about it. I mean, just look at the beauty of that vegetative growth. So many people in life would walk right by that tree, but you're gardeners. You take a second or a third look at this and say, wow, this is remarkable. And what's remarkable to me is just look at the way those leaves are arranged perfectly along that stem. You just really couldn't arrange them any more perfect if you tried to do it. It's just a remarkable architectural variation. I love it. So I crossed Ace of Hearts with a Cercis texensis form to try and get the glossiness of texensis into the compact background. And from that cross, I have a selection that we've referred to as 2014-5. That just refers to the year we made the selection, and it was selection number 5. And you can see here in this selection, you can see the glossiness of the texensis showing through. And I was down at the Sandhill station yesterday looking at my plots. This is a special tree. I'm just really amazed. It was funny. I was looking at that tree at the Sandhills yesterday, and I got a call from Greenleaf Nursery in Oklahoma. And they said, we can't believe the flower bud production on this tree. As I was looking at that, this tree is just covered with flowers. The flower bud density is remarkable. So there it is. And you can again see the density of the flowering. Beautiful small leaves that have a nice burgundy tinge to them as they emerge. Here it is in a nursery setting. I don't know that I have a picture. Well, yeah, there's the original tree. This is the original tree at the Sandhill station. This was taken about 2 summers ago. This tree is now 10 years old. That original seedling is 10 years old. And that tree is no taller than 6 feet. I've never pruned it. It's just a very nice, dense, compact dwarf. Okay. So this is actually now being released this year. It'll be called Emerald, will be the name. Okay. And it'll be marketed as a part. There's a new series of these dwarfs that are being released that have coming from my program. I'm trying to, the Garden Gem series of redbuds will be a series of compact redbuds that come out of the Ace of Hearts background. Okay, taken about 15 years to complete this series. So this is going to be one of the first one. Okay, so this will be the Garden Gem Emerald. This is one of my former research assistants on the right, in the left image there. That's Leanne Keneally, and on the right is one of the individuals at Star Roses and Plants. Star supported my program for a number of years. And we cross Ace of Hearts with Purple Leaf and with Weepers. And just to show you, in the seedling rows, here is a non-dwarf Purple Leaf form. And you can pick out the Ace of Hearts dwarf types very quickly in the seedling rows. This is probably about late June, early July on a 1-year-old seedling. Just look how small those leaves are in those Ace of Hearts descendants. Okay. And that dwarfism in Ace of Hearts behaves as a single gene mutation. If you cross Ace of Hearts with the typical redbud and grow out 2nd generation plants, you'll get 3 normals and 1 dwarf. 1860s Mendelian genetics. Okay. And here's one of the dwarfs in a nursery setting. Just look at the intensity of that color and that beautiful dwarf architecture. Okay. Here it is as a grafted tree. And this one will probably be released next year. Okay. That's 2017-6. Here's a nursery in Tennessee that top grafted some of them as a standard. They graft them about 4 to 5 feet off the ground. These compact forms allow for that type of deployment. And then the next step, of course, let's get a weeping form with the purple leaf and the compact architecture. And this is 2017-8. What's very interesting is, even though the weeping gene that is incorporated into this dwarf purple leaf selection you see here is the same weeping gene you find in Lavender Twist and Ruby Falls. It's that abrupt, straight down to the ground, what I call a rigid weeping behavior. When you introduce the weeping gene into the compact background, the weeping tends to be a little bit more graceful. The tree wants to, it'll spread a little bit more before it seems to weep. It's almost like a traveler redbud kind of a weeping. I really like the look of it as compared to that rigid weeping that you get in some of the other forms. So this is going to be another one in the Garden Gem series. Now, if I ever visit your gardens now, I expect to see the whole series in your gardens. Okay, is that a deal? All right. There's the growth on a 2017-8. Nurseries like to deploy a series where you have the green weeper, the purple weeper. This is what I've been able to provide them with this series of redbuds. This is a young 2017-8 that I just planted in my home landscape. There used to be a 20-year-old traveler right there that finally died out after a couple of years of sub 10-degree freezes. So I thought that I'd put a 2017-8 in that site. And again, you can see here, see how before the weeping starts, you get more of an almost an umbrella kind of an architecture on that growth. Okay. This is an older tree in one of my trails behind the Arboretum at NC State. And then just to quickly tell you to finish the series, there's the green leaf compact weeper. Okay, and that was the first year of that tree. And there it is 5 years later. Okay. Okay. So this is a cross of, there's a Texensis form called Texas White. It's a white flowered form of the Texas redbud. And I crossed Texas White with Ace of Hearts many years ago. So this is a compact Texensis form. This is the original tree. This tree is 5 years old, 6 years old perhaps. And this is a white flowered Texensis non-weeper. But just look how dense that growth is on that selection. And the glossiness of those leaves is quite remarkable. And the reason those leaves are so glossy and so bright is being white flowered, there's no purple pigment in the petioles or in the leaf. If you ever look at a typical redbud that's purple flowered, as those new leaves come out, there's a little bit of a purple tinge to those leaves. And even later in the summer, you'll see purple in the petioles, the little stem that attaches the leaf to the plant. This is totally devoid of any anthocyanin, and consequently, it is really bright Texensis foliage. I like the look of this one. And these compact forms make actually nice pot plants. They're much more manageable in a pot. This is one of the plants that Star Roses was trying out, testing. So this one's probably going to hit the scene in about 3 years. Here it is in the field, in a pot on the left, decorative pot on the left, and just a normal nursery pot on the right. Okay. And then lastly in the series, what do we need now? What do we not yet have in this series of dwarfs? Gold. We need gold dwarf, don't we? Okay. So again, here we go. Here's a seedling flat of F2s between, in this case, Rising Sun crossed to Ace of Hearts. Ace of Hearts dwarf, Rising Sun is another gold leaf form. Okay. Pick out the golds very, very quickly. We grew out hundreds and hundreds of golds. Most of them were junk, but you find a couple good ones. And here's our little gold Ace of Hearts type, right? That's a sweet little tree, I think. Very nice. That was, those were the seedlings. Here's about a 3-year-old tree in a trowel behind the Arboretum. And then a couple of years later, there it is. There's the gold leaf selection next to one of the selections of the purple leaf weepers. That would make a nice combination in a landscape, I think, is to combine those two together. Okay. So what I've shown you quickly here in 15 minutes has taken about 15 years to do. All right, okay. So it's very satisfying to get to this part of the program, but yet what I like about plant breeding is that the process of discovery, I guess, for lack of a better word, because no matter what stage you are in your process, you're always seeing new things, you're getting new ideas, and you get to be a witness to all the beauty that Mother Nature provides you. And sometimes you get lots of surprises, which is great too. There's disappointments in this business, things that you think will work out don't, but there's also lots of surprises that turn out to be very, very exciting. There's the dwarf gold in a decorative pot. And moving along here, we've got the gold leaf form now into a Texensis background. This is going to be released next year as Gilded Hearts. We've trialed this thing in Israel for 5 years. You know what days are like in Israel. Low humidity, hot, dry. I had a call from them one day and said, this is an amazing plant. This thing just does not scorch. It loves the heat. This grows great. So here it is, the sand hills. Here it is in my front yard in the middle of summer. My front yard's my home landscape's a great trial garden for redbuds, as you can imagine. There's the foliage, and again, you can see some of that glossiness from the Texensis parent. Okay. Here it is. Here's the tree in Israel. Okay, in the middle of the summer, in their trials, and it's got a very attractive flower color too. When you use Texensis as a parent, you get some flower colors that differ from the typical purple that you see in our normal Canadensis. And white pom-poms, we now have the double-flowered form in a white, a companion to pink pom-poms. How's my time, John? Doing okay? Yeah. Okay, very good. Former student here as a interesting for scale. This tree has very nice architecture. I made the original cross for white pom-poms I made in 1999, and I released this tree last year. Now, I sort of put it on the back burner for a few years because I got interested in other things, and then I revisited that F1 tree and said, I ought to really finish up this project. So we started about 8 years ago trying to wrap that up, and this is white pom-poms, very, very floriferous. Again, I was at the Sandhill Station yesterday, and this is about the stage it's at right now, the full bloom. Okay. And there's those interesting double-flowered, the double-flowered inflorescence. Again, this might be a single or a double, who knows? You know, a lot of people don't like white on the tree, so the sales are usually not that good. But I can imagine someone maybe putting an array of pink pom-poms and white pom-poms in just to have a nice combination of those two colors. Who knows what people or landscapers will do with it. Okay. One of the most important things I've learned as a plant breeder is to get opinions from other people. The dwarf series derived from Ace of Hearts, Omer Hochberg, the Israeli nurseryman whose picture I showed earlier, he and his agent came over to visit me in about, I guess that was about 2004, maybe, John. They visited you down at Plant Delights, I think. And we got to thinking about the fact that redbud wasn't very popular in Europe. It didn't have much of a presence in the European Union. Many people in Europe didn't really know what a redbud was. So one of their goals was to try and popularize redbud in the EU, but develop trees that might be more appropriate for the European Union audience or ornamental audience as compared to the US. And one of the things they said, knowing about Ace of Hearts, what we need is a series of compact trees that would be more amenable to European landscapes, smaller yards, smaller gardens. And that really got me on that goal of developing this series of compact forms. So again, it just demonstrates that it's not what I like so much as to what the consumer or what the landscape industry might like. Sometimes I'll be showing people my selections and someone will say to me, "Oh, I really don't like variegated forms." And I'll say, well, that's fine and good, but a lot of people do like variegated forms. So I don't dictate my program based on what I like or what one individual likes. I try to my goal is to introduce diversity and variation and new things into the trade. If you're familiar with the ornamentals industry, there's a lot of plants that are released that are just what I call knockoffs of existing plants. So you get 6 variants of a butterfly bush. When I released my blue chip butterfly bushes, in 3 years, there are other knockoffs of blue chip and dwarfs that came out. So I've always tried to stay one step ahead of the competition, so to speak. And I don't want to release something that's just a knockoff, so to speak. I want to release something that's new, unique, and diverse. Some of them fly, some of them don't. That's okay. Oh, this is just another selection in the program of a weeping variegated form with purple color that hasn't been released yet. Let me talk about an interesting project. How many of you are familiar with Appalachia Red? I don't know if you have an Appalachia Red here in the garden or not. Appalachia Red was found in the wild in Maryland, and it was selected by the gentleman who discovered it because of its beautiful flower color. It's as close to red as we have in a redbud, okay? And there's a tree in the arboretum, and these are the flowers as they're just beginning to emerge on the right-hand image here. So that's Appalachia Red, and Appalachia Red is pure canadensis. I mentioned Oklahoma, the variety Oklahoma earlier, which is a Texensis. Texensis, or Oklahoma, is probably the most vivid, pigmented, colored form of Texensis. Oklahoma having that magenta-like flower color. So we thought, what would happen if we combine the best flowered or the most vividly flowered Texensis with the most vividly flowered canadensis? Could we come up with something that's even better in the F2 generation that combines the best of both of those varieties? And what I should say is I've done some work with one of my colleagues at NC State, and our question was, is there something unique about the pigment profile of Appalachian Red, the pigment floral profile of Appalachian Red, that differs from all the other redbuds? In other words, what makes Appalachian Red have that near red pigmentation? So we surveyed about 15 different varieties of redbud. And interestingly enough, we found that Appalachia Red has a unique pigment that's that's found in relatively high quantities, that's found only in very trace amounts in other redbuds. So that's very strong circumstantial evidence that that pigment could be the basis for why we get this more vivid color in Appalachia Red that you don't see in your typical purple flowered forms, okay? So these are the F1s of Oklahoma by Appalachia Red. We collected F2 seeds off of those, and we have grown out a plot of 700 F2s from that cross. I walked those F2s in full bloom yesterday. Oh, talk about a tough job, okay? And I'm sorry, I don't really have any images to show you because I just took those images yesterday afternoon and I sent this presentation to John on Sunday morning, okay? But I will say that we're finding some beautiful forms, but I don't know we're finding anything that's darker or deeper than the pigment in Appalachia Red. But what we will find in there is we'll find Appalachia Red forms that are just as vivid and maybe have a little bit of the Oklahoma magenta background in. but we'll find those forms that have the glossy text-sensitive leaf character. So that will be a contribution, is an Appalachia red that has more of the text-sensitive heat and drought tolerant as compared to the typical canadensis. Step forward, okay? We didn't find, I don't think we're going to find what we had hoped to find, but we're still going to find something that's a step forward. Some new things in the market. This isn't mine, but this is a new redbud called Zigzag that has this very distinct zigzag architecture from node to node. If you look at typical redbud, you'll see a little bit of a zigzag architecture on the growth of a redbud. This one is just much, much more pronounced. This was found in the wild. It's a chance seedling up in Connecticut or Massachusetts, one of the northeastern states. And this is now just making its way into the trade. Okay. And of course, you know, as a plant breeder, I've crossed this with everything under the sun. Okay. All right. So 10 years from now, the Zigzag series. We hope. You never know. I have no idea how this is inherited. Is this going to be a single gene? Is it going to be a multiple gene? Is it going to be easy to recover these in the F2? Is it not inherited, which is sometimes the case? We don't know. So all that work may be for naught. That's okay. Now, what am I showing here? Redbud that has been chewed up by a, this is leafcutter bee, okay? This is one of the selections at my house, and the leafcutter bees love this selection. I don't know why. Sort of interesting to think about. You know, why would a leafcutter bee go after this one? I don't know. But the point I wanted to bring up is that sometimes people will say to me, of course, we have this, there's this, I don't want to say movement, but a lot of people are committed to growing native plants, and that's fine. We should grow as many native plants as we can in our landscapes. I take a more cosmopolitan view of my landscape and grow lots of non-natives that are well behaved, but that's a personal choice. Redbud being a native, of course, one of the values of being a native is that it's going to serve as a food source for our native insects. Now, you might like some of those, honeybees, or not honeybees, that's not native, bumblebees, carpenter bees, our native, you know, our solitary wasps and whatnot that visit redbud flowers. Oh, that's great. They're native pollinators. But when our native insects start attacking leaves, people go, oh, I don't like this, you know. What's on my redbud? I just say, it's one of our native insects and you're supporting its populations. Congratulations. You can't have it both ways, okay? You got to take the good with the not so good. And the fact that the leafcutter bees love this, that's all right, okay? And you'll see other injurious native insects on redbuds. That's just part of the process. If you don't want native insects on your trees, plant a calorie pear, okay? Excuse me, or a crepe myrtle. Neither of them support much of anything. Okay. All right. And speaking of diseases, there are always challenges. There are new diseases always arising. There's a new disease on the scene that's called vascular streak dieback. In actuality, NC State's doing a lot of work on this disease, but they're having a difficult time actually identifying what is the exact causal organism, okay? What specific, it's a fungus, we know that, but there's some disagreement as to what specific genus and species of fungus that it is. And one of the reasons for that is this organism is very, very difficult to grow in culture. If you can't grow an organism in culture, it's hard to study. It's hard to do controlled studies with it. It's hard to do controlled inoculations, so on and so forth. So right now they're called vascular streak dieback. A lot of the first incidence of this disease, maybe 3-4 years ago, was primarily in redbud from nurseries in Tennessee. And at first they thought, this is going to be a disease specific to redbud. And the symptoms of the disease are you get in the upper branches, you get some wilting and dieback. You see these small little malformed leaves produced at the base of some of these dying branches, okay? You get marginal necrosis on the leaves because the fungus is systemic in the vascular system, and then it starts influencing water uptake in the plant. So you get leaf necrosis. The leaves become yellow, and in some cases, the trees die. This is a big concern right now in the production nurseries who produce redbuds. Now it's been discovered in dogwoods, been isolated from Amelanchier, it's been isolated from Lindera. Just got an email yesterday from the listserv. Someone has isolated it from Prunus salicina, Japanese plum. So this, whatever this organism is, it has a wide host range, okay? Which should be very, very concerning until we learn how to manage it, okay? So just wanted to mention that this is a disease of concern and that there's always challenges to be met, and it emphasizes why we should always support agricultural research at our state universities to have people working on these kinds of problems and coming up with solutions.
Has this gotten into China? That might be
Yeah, I think that's just anecdotal observation. It may be that there's not as much Chinensis grown as compared to Canadensis. I don't know. It would be great if that would be the case, but again, without the luxury of doing controlled inoculations under controlled conditions, it's hard to say that. I hope that's the case. So these are just some of the images showing the discoloration in the bark and in the wood. Anyone recognize this tree? Some folks in the audience here have seen this in my classes. This is slender. We're going to quickly switch gears to sweet gum, just to say a few words about sweet gum. Is that okay? When I tell people I'm breeding sweet gum, people say, "Oh man, what are you thinking? Why are you breeding sweet gum with those gumballs? Are you crazy?" No, I'm not crazy. Sweet gum's a native tree. It's a beautiful native tree. It supports supports the larvae of some of the most beautiful native moths that we have in this country, okay, which people don't think about. And I find that sweet gum is looked upon with disfavor in its native range, but is looked upon very favorably outside of its native range. There's a lot of sweet gum grown in California. There's a lot of sweet gum grown in Europe. I visited a nurseries in Belgium years ago. What did I find in those nurseries? I saw slender silhouette everywhere, okay? New Zealand, Australia grows lots of sweet gum, okay? So sometimes what we have in our own backyard, we look upon disfavorably because it's too common, okay? But I've always liked this beautiful, now that's a columnar tree, isn't it? First described by the first person that saw it as a telephone pole with leaves on it. They weren't horticulturalists, okay? This was one of the very first grafted trees. This tree was found at Timms Ford State Park, right outside of Winchester, Tennessee, southern Tennessee, okay? One of the very first trees grafted was by a gentleman named Don Shadow, and then another nurseryman named Harold Newbarrow. This is in Harold's front yard. This is the first slender silhouette he grafted. He planted it in his front yard. I was there last summer and had my picture taken next to slender. Makes me look pretty dwarf, doesn't it? Okay, it's a magnificent tree, maybe a little bit too magnificent in terms of height for some people. So just for fun, I had an undergraduate student doing some sweet gum work with me for an independent project back in 2011, now 13 years ago or 12 years ago. We crossed slender silhouette with gumball. Gumball is the lobose form. It looks like a big giant beach ball. What do you think you get when you cross gumball with slender silhouette? In the first generation, you get a garden variety sweet gum, okay? Okay. But when you go to the F2, the second generation, and we've got there just a few years ago, you get the columnar forms, just like some of the silhouette. But what we're getting is we're getting some of the compactness from gumbo. So we're developing columnar forms that are much less vigorous than slender silhouette, okay, which I think may actually be an asset. Okay, this is just one of those selections. Then we get the dwarfism from gumbo and the columnar from slender silhouette, and we get these little dwarf columnar forms. What are these going to look like when they're 4 or 5 years old? I don't know. It'll be fun to see. This is the exciting part of plant breeding, is these kinds of things that arise. Oh my gosh. There it is about a year later. Okay. And now we're into about year 4 on some of these. There it is with foliation. Will anybody buy these? I don't know, but it's sure fun developing them. I don't really know. Okay. Maybe we'll put an outlay of them here at the garden. And there's one that's a little bit semi-upright gumball, and there's a true gumball form on the right. I mean, isn't that cool? We're getting all these interesting combinations. Okay. All right. And then we have a slender silhouette type, grows just as fast as slender silhouette. Look at the fall color on that. People say with slender silhouette, I don't like slender silhouette, it has no fall color. This one will. All right. All right. And then lastly, I can't get out of working with peaches. So we've released a new ornamental peach called Ruby Ruffle. It's a cross of the double flowered red leaf peach in the J.C. Ralston Arboretum called NCSU Double Red Dwarf. And I crossed double red dwarf with a ornamental purple peach called Bonfire. Some of you might be familiar with the ornamental peach called Bonfire. So we got that really deep pink color into a dwarf with purple leaves. And so there's the flowers. And when they do first come out of the bud, they really have almost a red color to them. And look at the whole tree is covered with flowers. It's remarkable. Now, I know peach is not a perfect landscape plant. The big liability is peach tree borer. And if you don't treat for peach tree borer, they'll become firewood in a couple of years, okay? But peach tree borer is actually a very, very easy insect to control on a peach tree. And you can do it organically, totally organically. You can do it. There's one generation of that insect a year. The females fly in, and they mate in early August to late August. The females lay their eggs on the very bottom 12 to 18 inches of the trunk on a normal peach tree, okay? So if by about in mid-August you get a piece of aluminum foil and cover the soil line, flare it out a little bit at the soil line and cover about the first 18 inches of the trunk, mom has nowhere to lay her eggs. She will not lay her eggs up on the tree. She'll only lay her eggs on the trunk. She's very, very particular, like many females, okay? All right, so I jest. What I do with my ornamental peach at home is I just put a little aluminum foil on the trunk, leave it on there for about 6 weeks. No borers, no pesticides. Okay. Foil works for me. Anything will just serve as a physical barrier to that female. Okay. There it is in the catalog with the purple foliage. And I just want to say thanks to some of my former assistants. This is Leanne Keneally, who was my most recent research assistant. She has now moved to Virginia to start her own nursery, specialty grafting nursery. My successor, Dr. Chen at NC State, is now taking over the breeding program at NC State, and I've left him with a wealth of material to work with. And just a quick thank you, just to show that I've had so many people who have been a part of the program and that have helped me, and that I couldn't have done any of this. And I couldn't have done any of it without people like yourself who love ornamental plants and put them in your garden. So thanks very much. I appreciate it. It's my breeding assistant.
Yeah. Thank you, Denny. You know, I'm a self-professed cercitophile, so I mean I've always loved redbuds. You know, working at the Ralston with that redbud collection and seeing all the amazing stuff coming coming out of Denny's program and other programs. It's a fantastic tree, and this is kind of hoping I'm whetting your appetite for a project we want to do out on the trails. We've got an area that we cleared out that what my vision is a redbud grove. I want every native redbud selection that exists, where you come out on the trails, and in spring it's just going to be a cacophony of every flower color, taking the weeping ones, training them over the trails so you'll go underneath them. So it's just a little project that if you're interested in, definitely reach out to me, because I think it'll be fun, and then it also feeds my addiction. So but definitely thank you, Denny, for talking about it. Yeah.
Nice to meet all you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. I'll be here if you have any questions. I appreciate your interest.
Yeah. I mean, it just, this is what gets exciting about horticulture, is all the new breeding, the minds behind it. And hopefully we'll see y'all in about 2 weeks for our spring plant sale preview. Get excited for that. Start saving up now. And just, don't look at it as a lot of money. It's supporting a good cause. So thank you again, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.